On today's show, I'm breaking down Martin Perez's fantastic breakout season. What went right? What were some of the lows? And what are the Rangers going to do about him in the offseason? All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan, the founder and host for all 4 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Today is Thursday, October 13th. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers and subscribe on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment any single thing below. Now, let's get into Martin Perez's fantastic breakout season. What were the highs, the lows, the things where he improved, and how is it so much better than pretty much everything else he has done in his career to this point? He finishes the season as by far the best, most valuable, every metric you want to use except for strikeouts. He was the best starting pitcher on this Rangers club. He finishes the year with a career high 5.0 baseball reference WAR, a 2.89 ERA in 32 starts, 1 complete game, 1 shutout, 196 in a third innings, 169 strikeouts, 69 walks, which I think is pretty darn nice, an ERA plus of 136, a FIP of 3.27. Now, what do all those numbers mean? It means Martin Perez was good. He was signed on a 1-year, $4 million deal after a season where he lost his starting rotation spot in Boston. He was looking for a place to go where he could go be a starter. He had offers other places. I'm pretty sure I've heard him say that he has had different places that offered him multi-year deals, but he wanted to come back to Texas. He felt comfortable there. He felt like that was home. That's where he came into his own, made his major league debut at such a young age. This was his 10th season in the major leagues. And, there are some late blooming lefties, some guys who don't really put it all together, who have a lot of promise coming up as a prospect and then can't quite figure it out until later on in life. And this was his age 31 season. His, like I said, 10 years in the big leagues. He got 10 years of big league service time, and he made his first All-Star appearance this year. He was fantastic. He was pinpoint with his location, and it seemed like the thing that he figured out the most was just, I'm really dang good. Yeah, I've been giving these major league hitters too much credit, letting things spin off the rails, and all that talk about, guys, they need to figure things out mentally and be in a better place mentally. It seems like he's finally found that. He is pretty zen up there, does not allow a lot of base runners, does not allow or a lot of base runners to score, I should say. He did work around so many base runners all year. That was one of the things that his expected stats didn't like as much about him, is because he didn't have an incredibly low batting average against, and he had a few more walks than a guy who has as pinpoint of control and command as he does. Would give up 3.2 walks per 9, which is right around his career average. 3.3 walks per 9 is what he's done in his career. But the thing he did so well this year is he just did not allow hard contact. He did not allow guys to barrel things up. The highest slider, I should say, in his baseball savant page is his barrel percentage. He was in the 92nd percentile in barrel percentage. Now, what that means is nobody is hitting him hard. They're making contact. Some bloop singles are falling in. He might walk a guy or two, but for the most part, they are not hitting the ball hard. Nobody is squaring him up, and no one is taking him out of the yard. That is one of the things that he did the best. He was up there on a lot of leaderboards in the American League, 5th in baseball reference WAR among American League pitchers. These are all among the AL pitchers. 8th in ERA, 5th in innings pitched, 2nd most batters faced, 7th in ERA plus, 2nd in home runs per 9, and 8th in fielding independent pitching, which, if you don't know what that is, it basically just factors in the 3 true outcomes that a pitcher can control: home runs, strikeouts, and walks. And the walks weren't great. The strikeouts were better than he'd done in his career before, and the home runs were at an elite low. So those are the things that he did incredibly well. He did not allow a single home run until June 5th against of course, Eugenio Suarez, because he just hits a lot of home runs. That's just what he does. He had 32 starts this year, and after the first two, he went 5 or more innings in every single one of them. Those first two, he wasn't quite fully healthy to start the season, but he found his form really, really quickly. He went 4 innings in both of those first 2 starts against Colorado at home, where he allowed 3 earned runs in both of those starts against the Angels as well. He went 4 innings, allowed 4 runs total, and 3 earned runs at that point. But after that, it was pretty much smooth sailing from there on out. He was just dominating hitters, and I think having Jonah Heim back there, having an elite framing catcher, one of the best in Major League Baseball, I think that made all the difference in the world. He's had some decent catchers for him before. He had Robinson Chirinos, who was pretty good at that for a long time. In his first stint in Texas, he had Jonathan Lucroy, who, well, before he came to Texas, he was really good at framing pitches. Not as much so after he came to Texas, and he had a few other catchers in Boston that were just fine, and in Minnesota that were fine. I think he had Mitch Garver for a while. I'm not sure if those two ever crossed paths in that. I think actually, yeah, no, I know that he did in 2019, because that was when Garver was absolutely crushing it. So yeah, this is the best framing catcher he has ever had, and I think that made all the difference in the world with him, having that rapport with him and having that, connection and being able to steal all those strikes. The walks were still up there a little bit, so maybe he can be just a little bit better in his command, but we saw in this game, in this season, I should say, the Martin Perez that was, heralded as a top prospect. I went and looked up what they said about him back in 2012, the last time that he was a prospect, on MLB Pipeline. They said the prospect world can be a little bit fickle. They talked about him, being so young and a chance to have 3+ pitches with the changeup and the curveball and the fastball. The changeup, it seems to be the best pitch among those, but the month of May was absolutely phenomenal. He won his first ever League Pitcher of the Month award, I guess American League Pitcher of the Month. He had an ERA below 1 in that month, a .64 ERA in May, where he had 42 innings pitched in those 6 starts. He had the complete game shutout in Houston. One of my favorite, I'm going to say my favorite game of the season, because it was absolutely fantastic. And it wasn't all highs. There were some months where things kind of went off the rails, including that very next month of June, and August was a little bit rough for him, as well as those first couple of starts. We're going to get into some of the things that went wrong for him or could have gone a little bit better. But first, this episode is brought to you by Rhone. Sometimes it is so difficult to find a very comfortable dress shirt. They're always tight. They're if you're changing weights, or you have it's so expensive and so annoying and such a hassle to find these great shirts. But there is a better way. The dress shirt was due for a radical reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. Rhone's commuter shirt is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible shirt known to man, and here is why. Rhone's comfortable 4-way stretch fabric, it provides breathability and flexibility that leaves you free to enjoy whatever life throws your way, from your commute to work to 18 holes of golf. They can handle it all. It's time to feel confident with a wrinkle-free shirt without the hassle with Rhone's wrinkle-free technology. Wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the shirt. It's that easy. With Gold Fusion and anti-odor technology, you'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long. And on top of that, Rhone is 100% machine washable, so you can ditch the dry cleaner altogether. The commuter shirt can get you through the workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to Rhone.com/lockedon. Use promo code LOCKEDON to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to RHONE.com/lockedon and use code LOCKEDON. It's time to find your corner office comfort. Now, what went wrong for Martin Perez this season? Now, the walks, that has always been a problem in his career for a guy who doesn't have the most overpowering fastball, doesn't have the most dominating raw stuff. I mean, his changeup is probably, I would say, the only plus pitch. I would even give it a double plus because of how ridiculously elite it was this year, but the stuff isn't overwhelming. So when he is not on his game, when he doesn't have his command, it can be difficult to work through things. We have seen it in years past where he'd have one inning and it would spiral and things would go off the rails. But he got a lot better at that this season, of when he didn't have his best stuff, still pitching it through. One of the things that I really appreciate him this year is that he had 25 starts of 6 or more innings pitched. He had 23 quality starts and 10 starts with 7 or more innings. Probably could have had a few more of those that he could have stayed out there a little bit longer. But when things went bad, they still found a way to go bad. The month of August was the worst of his season. He had probably the most frustrating game of the season was on August 9th against the Astros in Houston. By the way, he faced the Astros a whole lot this season, way more than he faced anybody else, and it felt like he was either really, really on against them or really off. And this was by the time the season, it kind of felt like in this month of August, it's like, all right, well, the last time they were 500 was in May. The only time they were 500, they never made it above 500 on the season. But in August, it's like, all right, well, things aren't going super well. I think the very next start after this was when John Gray got hurt. Maybe it was the start before this. I don't remember exactly. But the Rangers had a 5-0 lead. A 4-0 lead on Houston. In Houston, they'd finally cracked Jose Urquidy. They got him for 3 home runs, 5 runs total in that game. They knocked him out after 5 innings, and you thought, okay, well, Martin Perez is on the hill. Like this is going to be fine. But then in the bottom of that 4th inning, right after they get that 4th run, they give up 4 runs in the bottom of the inning. It was so incredibly frustrating. They even gave up a grand slam to Aledmus Diaz. And there it goes. Everything just right out the door. 3 home runs from Simeon and Seager and Garcia. And it's like, okay, everything feels right in this one. The Rangers are going to coast this one. And no, they absolutely blew that one wide open. And then the Astros go to their bullpen of Will Smith, Rafael Montero, Hector Neris, and Alex Presley and just get absolutely nothing. The Rangers get absolutely nothing out of them after that comeback. And it was just so frustrating. It looked like Martin Perez of old. Like normally this season when the Rangers gave him a lot of run support, everything was fine. Everything was totally golden. Even in low scoring games, that was one of the things he did well. When the Rangers gave 0-2 runs of support while he was in there, that was 8 games. He had a 1.98 ERA in games, and he was 0-5 because, there's only so much you can do. When the Rangers gave him 3-5 runs of support, he still had a winning record of 4-3, a 3.09 ERA. That was 14 games. And one of those was the complete game shutout, 84 innings, and 80 strikeouts. He was just dominant then. And with 6+ runs of support, I don't know how he didn't get tagged with the loss on that game. I'm really not sure. But he didn't, because when the Rangers scored 6 or more runs when he was starting, that was 10 of his starts. He averaged over 6 innings per start, then had a 3.34 ERA. So even when things were going really, really well, he would just go at hitters and get you the innings you needed. And even in some of his blow-up starts this year, I know this is where I'm supposed to be talking about the bad parts of what he did this year. I mean, that was his worst start of the season, and there was not a whole lot redemptive about it. But even in some of the starts where he got blown up, the way that he was able to bounce back was really encouraging to me and showed that I don't think this is a one-off season, which is why I need the Rangers to go ahead and re-sign him now, immediately. As I'm recording this, please go sign him to a 3 or 4 year deal. But the most encouraging start, even though it was a blow-up start, was against Chicago back in June. In one of the weirder series that the Rangers ended up playing, they won that series in 10. They won that game in 10 innings, dropping a 4-bomb in the top of that 10th inning. But this was This was right when Martin Perez was coming off the peak of his powers, that elite month of May, and this was one of his first starts in June. He went 5 innings, allowed 6 earned runs, 7 runs total, got hit 12 times, 12 hits, and a home run in this one. But he was able to power through, get through 5 innings on a White Sox lineup that was at the peak of their powers at that time, a very right-handed hitting lineup. I mean, Jose Abreu, Luis Robert, Andrew Vaughn. They didn't have Moncada, or they did have Moncada, but they didn't have Tim Anderson at the time. But still, this lineup was just absolutely wrecking him. But he still went 5 innings, kept the Rangers in it. The offense was able to come back, get a 5 spot in that 4 spot in that 5th inning, and then battle back enough to tie it up late. The bullpen worked really well. Big performance from Matt Moore, Matt Bush, and Brock Burke. And Jesus Tinoco had that perfect 6th inning that I will always remember, one of his better innings, where he struck out 3. The White Sox lineup was just dominating that day, and he found a way to have a perfect 6th inning with 3 strikeouts, and the Rangers just battled back and did just enough to win that one. But that was one of the moments where I thought, okay, this is a different Martin Perez. The older Martin Perez would have absolutely crumbled and would not have made it through that 5th inning, would not have gotten out of it. He would have just been totally done. But this was not the same guy, and I think that definitely exemplified it. Coming up, we're going to look at some of his other great moments on the season, overall takeaways, and the goals for next year. But first, this word from our sponsors. So that was one of the games of the year for me, was that win against Chicago. That whole series was some of my favorite Rangers baseball, because they weren't completely out of it. I could still trick myself into thinking, okay, well, this lineup is pretty solid. Martin Perez, John Gray doing their thing. The other guys they're there in the rotation. Bullpen has got its moments, but I think one of my other under the radar games that I forgot about until I was going through his season was the win against Tampa Bay that got the Rangers to 500 for the last time. This was back on, where'd we go? May 31st. So the last game in May, that beautiful month before everything slipped away and went totally into the toilet for the rest of the season. Perez went 7 shutout innings, struck out 5, didn't walk a single batter, and only allowed the 3 hits. And the Rangers bullpen came in and shut the door down with 2 more perfect innings with John King and Joe Barlow. The Rangers got to Ryan Yarbrough for 3 runs, including a pair of home runs, one by Seager, one by Garcia, and just a dominating performance at the end. A very, very encouraging month of May when everything was going right. You thought, okay, wow, that is pretty much the game that sealed up the American League Pitcher of the Month award for May for him. Things kind of didn't go quite as well after that. The month of June was a little bit rough on him, as was the month of August, but still, this was a sign. It's like, okay, maybe the Rangers aren't going to finish with 90-plus losses. Well, they did, but Martin Perez turning into a really, really good pitcher was not something that anybody expected at the beginning of the season. And I was, of the many things that I've been wrong about in Rangers baseball, being incredibly meh on the Martin Perez signing after the lockout. That might have been one of the wrongest I've been. That and the Nathaniel Lowe trade. I got those pretty wrong. But I am very glad to be wrong about it. To be at this point in the season, if you told me at the beginning of the year Martin Perez is going to be the best pitcher on the Rangers, I would have thought, oh God, everything went horribly wrong. And, well, it kind of did, but also he was just really darn good, and how desperate I would be to get him under contract for 3-4 years, maybe even 5, honestly. Like, this is... The pitching market is fine out there, and granted, I don't know if he's going to have a sub-3 ERA for all of the seasons of whatever contract the Rangers or whoever else signs him to, but I think this is a sign that he is legitimately different. Is he, one of the top 5 pitchers in the American League? No. Is he one of the top 15 pitchers in Major League Baseball? No, I don't think so. I think he's definitely in the top 25, but I think he's probably a number 2 starter on a playoff team. So the Rangers there are some other starting pitchers out there that are going to be really darn good, that are going to cost a whole lot of money. I think getting a Carlos Rodon should be at the top of the Rangers' priority. After they sign Martin Perez, you've got this exclusive negotiating window where theoretically no one can come in and talk to him about signing him to a big old deal. But the point is, he feels comfortable here. He likes it here. In spring training, he was on the backfields with all those Rangers prospects talking about, I remember when I was a kid, this is what I would have wanted to hear from big leaguers. He has made a huge impact on the staff and on the position players as well, just his leadership and, being such a veteran presence. There were some guys who were on this club to be a veteran presence that were not great on the diamond. And those guys like Cole Calhoun and Brad Miller, they're like great clubhouse guys, and Culberson too. It's like that's fine to have those great clubhouse guys that are end of the bench guys, but having a great clubhouse guy, a great veteran leader, calming presence that is actually performing is something entirely different. I mean, Semien and Seager are the calming presence. They're not the as vocal leaders. They're not the take a guy under the wing. They're just kind of like, I'm going to go about my business and I'm going to go kick butt because that's what I do. You go deal with your own stuff. I'm going to lead by example, and that's fine. They don't have to change who they are. But having a guy like Martin Perez who does that is incredibly valuable, and I think something that the Rangers desperately cannot afford to lose. They've got John Gray as another guy who is solid in the rotation for the next couple of years. Dane Dunning is fine back into the rotation guy, but having the number 2 of a Martin Perez, then you go in, and if Martin Perez is your number 3 next year and John Gray is your number 4, whew, that is a competitive freaking team. That is a team that is actually pushing the heavyweights in your division of Houston and Seattle for that division title. Maybe not Houston because they're unreasonably good, unfortunately. But still, that is what it's going to take. And even if Martin Perez is the best pitcher on the starting staff next year, he puts up a similar season, I think that's not something that's out of the question. If the Rangers do make the playoffs and they're in the wild card and he is your game 1 starter, I think that is still a very solid, viable option. He has proved he can do it against the best in the league. He's had his moments where he is not his best, but he has turned a corner in learning how to pitch when the stuff is not there. And if you don't have the elite, just peak Justin Verlander stuff, the Shohei Ohtani stuff, you got to figure out those ways of pitching on your off nights when you can't just blow gas by everybody. And that is what he has done so well. One of the big things that he changed was his pitch usage. It has changed quite a bit this year. He relied very, very heavily on the sinker. That was very, very effective for him this year. He used the changeup a whole lot more than he had in years past. It was the second most frequent pitch that he used, 27.6% of the time. The cutter that he added after he left Texas, I think he just kind of changed the slider. This year he added back in the slider, not using it a whole lot, literally just like 1% of the time, but still it was a different pitch. The 4-seamer usage went down a whole lot. It has been going down for the last few years, and people lit up that 4-seamer. It's more of a show me pitch at this point. The sinker is the primary get strikes, get me over pitch, and he used it really effectively. And same with that changeup. Just a very, very devastating combination. Having that 4-seamer, kind of just knowing that it's there, I think made the sinker a lot more effective. Using it just occasionally, just like, hey, it's there, so you don't know just because you see fastball doesn't mean it's going to go arm side. It could go glove side or not move a whole lot like his 4-seamer does, but very, very effective stuff. The curveball was fairly effective this year. Just the ability to paint where he wanted with a catcher who can steal some of those strikes was huge for him. And I'm just so happy that he decided to come back to Texas. And again, priority 1 this offseason has got to be signing him to a long-term deal. Now, what kind of money do I think he's going to get? Honestly, if he gets $15 million a year, if you sign him to a 4-year, $60 million deal, you might be thinking, oh my gosh, Bryce, he has one good year and you forget literally everything else he's done. No, I'm not forgetting it. I'm remembering what kind of promise he had before and what I'm seeing on the diamond, on the mound every single game. This is a legitimate change. This is not a fluky season. This is a guy who's figured it out. It happens. It happens a lot with these lefties. And that is someone you cannot live with yourself with how bad this rotation is. Like, whatever the number is, clearly he likes being here. Clearly he took a less than favorable deal to kind of prove himself this year. And so the Rangers should reward that by spending a lot of money on keeping him here, because you need more than just him back in your rotation. If you lose Martin Perez, this rotation is ghastly next year with no outside additions. If Dane Dunning, as much as I like Dane Dunning and he had a solid season, if he is your number 2 going into next year behind John Gray, who, as much as I like John Gray, keeping him healthy for a full year, you're not getting 196 innings out of John Gray next year, I don't think, unless things go really, really right, which would be awesome, but it's not a reasonable expectation. Martin Perez is your solid guy. You needed, I thought even after they signed him, you needed one more starting pitcher. They did, but they didn't get one, so that is what they were left with. But still, he was solid, he was consistent, and even if he does slot in as your number 2 or 3 starter, the fact that he has turned this corner and your number 2 or 3 starter could have a sub-3 ERA and give you 196 innings and be this consistent, give you 6 innings pretty much every time out. Like, that is hugely, hugely valuable in a way that I don't think people appreciate as much as they did back in the old days. Innings pitched is a very, very important stat. It may be very basic, but still, it is one of the more important ones for a starting pitcher, because the Rangers only had one other guy go 150 plus innings, and they're going to need probably 3 such pitchers next year if they are wanting to even come close to sniffing the playoffs like they have talked their talk about doing. Now, before I let y'all go, I want to get into this Kumar Rocker start. He made his second start of the Arizona Fall League of his Rangers tenure. He went 2 innings this time out. He had 1 walk and also struck out a pair. Looked better. The slider was good. The fastball was running up there. The changeup was fairly consistent. And I was very excited. 94 to 97 for the fastball for those who were there. He got a couple of strikeouts with his slider. Again, that slider is so dang effective. I'm still a little worried about him not using his lower half as much. He's still kind of finding his way with that new delivery, that new arm slot, trying to put less pressure on his shoulders so he can be healthier for the future, so you can count on him to give you a Martin Perez-like workload once he gets up to the major leagues. I don't know if he's going to go 3 innings out his next time, or if he's always going to be, on this kind of very limited pitch count, but I'm encouraged by what I've seen. I'm glad just seeing him on the mound, and it is definitely something worth watching in that Arizona Fall League. The Rangers also have some other prospects there. Zavala is doing Zavala things. Trevor Hauver, both those guys with the decent power numbers in like 3 games or whatever, and an insane amount of walks. And Luis Angel Acuna is still absolutely crushing it at that level with a 900 OPS in, I believe, 7 games so far. He has been the Rangers' offensive star in that league, playing pretty much every day and playing primarily shortstop. So that's encouraging. Also, I don't know if we're just going to see Cody Freeman catching Kumar Rocker, or if the other catcher on that roster, who is Henry Davis, the number 1 overall pick from that 2021 draft, the Pirates draftee, could be catching him a little bit. I think that'd be fun to see what kind of chemistry they would have. It's also just such a weird dynamic of having 4 different teams' prospects all on one team, but it definitely makes for some interesting baseball. But that's going to do it for today's episode. For your next listen, go check out Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully. He gives you his unique perspective on Major League Baseball playoffs, including a Dodgers loss to Yu Darvish and the Padres last night in the NLDS. Some very exciting series going on there. And some ALDS stuff that's happening today, including a stupid walk-off home run by the Astros that I stopped watching. But, Paul Francis Sullivan didn't stop watching, and he will tell you all about what's going on. It is free and available wherever you get podcasts. Y'all, thank you so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.